the county used to give out grant funds, and in fact, the last grant funding that we received for, excuse me, emergency drain cleanout was, I think, 2010 or 2011. And that was for work that was done to a portion of the Pettit Conduit to redirect it as the one resident described. In 2011, we approached Public Works to ask for our 10 and 11 or 11 and 12 allotment of emergency drain funds to continue work on this pump station, and I'll come back to ownership. At the time, the Public Works Commissioner said, well, we would like you to take over the ownership of the stormwater pump station for the Murdoch Ballard, which pump stations oftentimes are underground, you don't see them, but you'll see a control panel, a little sign over by Speedway, between Speedway and the Wilson Boat Marina there. There's a pump station there. Public Works rebuilt it and said, well, we'll give you 50 grand or 100 grand or something like that, but we want you to take that over. Well, this board considered it and said, well, it's not our asset. We don't own it. We've never owned it. We don't want to take ownership. That means now we have to maintain it and operate it. Public Works Office at that time said, well, if you're not willing to take it, we're not going to provide you any more grants until you change your mind. They also did the same thing with Clinton Township. But during the election season last year, they conveniently changed their position and said, well, come right on in and apply for it. And it was kind of an interesting twist. As far as jurisdiction and ownership, this pump station never has been the ownership of Public Works. They didn't build it originally. It's part of the township's infrastructure and always has been. Right. The drains that run into it, right, the actual drains that feed into it, that easement, that easement is county. So what gives us permission, say for example, to go in and say, well, we're going to try to demuck a drain, we have to ask permission first. We can't work in that easement without permission.
We own the property. You have an easement on it. You don't own that property, the county doesn't own the property. We own it.
Okay, understood. But I guess the point being that your question relative to permission, we don't automatically have permission. Before we could proceed with this, over the last several years, we've worked with the county on how to upgrade this pump station. The decision to reverse the Pettit Conduit wasn't a Harrison Township decision. It was a joint decision between Harrison Township and Public Works. We don't unilaterally have that authority. It is a shared authority. And from a funding perspective, again, the county doesn't receive funding for those drains. They can receive funding from the locals, give to them, and they can do that work. I can't tell you how they did it in 1951. I wasn't here, sir, but I can tell you that let me just say, before I'm going to come here and ask for this, and before my peers and other communities are going to do the same thing, we're going to look for those sources of funding.
The way I look at it, they strive to balance the budget on the county level. Why don't they have it unbalanced a little bit and do the job here?
Okay.
John Pasquarelli, 28044 Ashland. First of all, I'd like to thank you for that presentation. If there was any doubt in my mind that this project needed to be done, after seeing that cobbled up mess of a pump station, there's no doubt in my mind. This can't wait. I don't want to wait till I'm waist deep in my basement, looking and pointing fingers. We shoulda, woulda, coulda. The time, you can't wait. This has got to be done. As an aside, it's the first time I'm hearing that the township is flush with cash, so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, and maybe, if that's the case, let's take a look at reducing my property taxes. That can help me pay for this assessment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board, audience, my name is Mark Walgrave. I live at 39295 Long. I've been in the community of this township for 59 years. I've seen the flooding in the township. I agree with the pump station needs to be fixed. There's a couple concerns I have. One, I'm a maintenance supervisor at Big 3. If I had a pump that was down and needed fixing, I thought there'd be some priority put on this, fixing the second pump. I don't understand that. Second all is, I want to protest. I think the township should pay for this, not the homeowners. The homeowners are burdensome now with taxes and burdensome with the economic things that's going on. And I would just like to say I'm protesting. Thank you.
Right. So, and I'll offer some answers in terms of repairing the existing pump station. on several levels, there are reasons why it's difficult to, I know Dave could, these guys could speak to it more, but we're talking about, even if we said we're gonna try to get that pump station running and back to its condition, we've got pumps that are obsolete. We've got 208 power there, so it's not really an efficient power. The way those pumps are constructed, there's a wear factor to them, but they can't be, I mean, the process of replacing them isn't just that simple. As I mentioned, the draw pipe, the elevation of that, it doesn't completely dewater the pond as it is, so there are some other issues. Right now, serviceability is an issue. We have to enter that area through the Beechwood Apartments. This includes access from the Metro Parkway right-of-way. There's several other things. SCADA is a component in this, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the things we have is we have a SCADA system. It's basically a computerized series of radio communications, so that if, for example, as the one resident said, he doesn't want his basement full of water, I don't think any of us do. We, on our pump stations, we have items that measure and monitor how those pump stations operate, and they send us that information to a smartphone to guys that are on call. So we have people that respond to that. So in the event that there is a failure at that pump station or an abnormal level, we're notified with this new pump station. So there's several upgrades. And I know that there's a conversation about taxes, and it's separate. I'll point out this one thing. The township, although we do pay our property taxes here at the township, the only property taxes that Harrison Township levies that we keep, if you will, is a millage for police, a millage for fire, and based on a vote of the people about 3-4 years ago, a millage for the library. There is no general fund dollars that we keep there. So there isn't, when you're paying that tax bill, some of that doesn't stay here for pumps, for example. We're the only community in Macomb County that doesn't levy a general tax millage on our property taxes. So if you were to live in any other community in Macomb County, you'd be paying for police somehow, paying for fire, but you'd also be paying for some amount of those dollars to stay. As the treasurer pointed out, we exist on revenue sharing from the state, we exist on franchise fees and various other sources. But there isn't a property tax that we collect that I could use on this pump station, because we can't levy a fire millage and then use it on a pump station. It has to be for fire, police has to be for police, so, sir.
Mr. Picasso, my name's Tim Gens, 38720 Chartier. My yard is the drain. It goes kitty corner through the whole thing. How would they work that out for us? And when it does rain, I've had 3 feet of water in my backyard. And I think it was in the early 90s, they went through and cleaned that drain out, the Savan. It was like 4 feet wide and 4 feet deep at that time. Right now, it's 4 inches deep and 20 feet wide. Is there anything planned in the future for that? And, you know, I mean, I live with that every day. It's just a swamp. So I was just wondering if anything could be done with that, and if it will be addressed in the future, or if I'll get anything about it. You know?
Sure. So I can address that or answer that question. Again, as it stands right now, our stormwater is flowing to this pond, to this detention basin. We're not dewatering it in 24 hours. We're dewatering it over several days. I can tell exactly what the level is because I live next to the Pettit Conlet. It flows into that, and I can pretty much tell you whatever the level of that pond is. I know because I can see it right next to my home. What we're shooting for is that if we have a large rain event, it goes over that weir. Once it drains low enough that it's not pouring over the weir, we want to get that down in 24 hours. What that does is it reduces those drains. When we don't do that and we have that standing water, we lead to a scenario where we have a cleaned out ditch that gradually just becomes just a kind of shallow depression.
It roads out.
Right, so until we can, and I know that, and it was we talked about this at length, until we can have a functioning pump station and drain, properly designed system, demucking drains upstream doesn't do us any good, because I'll be making a low spot at your place. I've got to start at the lowest, kind of work that way back,
That's
so.
where I'm at the lowest point right now, and I just wonder
Right.
if they're ever gonna make it any narrower again, because I'm losing my whole yard.
Right, and so we've We've demucked several hundred yards of drains already in the first, whatever it's been, since January 1, working with Public Works, and we're gonna continue to do that. Those dollars we do fund from the general fund, so within our line item budget, I think we have, I'm going by memory, but I'm gonna say we allocate something like $50,000 or $40,000 a year for storm drains in our current budget.
And one more thing, how would they assess my property with that being the 30-foot easement on that going right down the center of it? I mean, is that figured into that? It runs kitty corner from the front yard across to the back corner.
I don't think drains are
Would it be,
omitted
would it be
from,
considered a half acre, that, like, would it, it shows on the plot, or is it less?
it's whatever you have acreage assigned to your lot, and I don't believe easements are omitted from that.
No, so you're paying for that all the way through?
Yeah, so presumably, let's just say the center line of the drain, you're paying up to the center line, your neighbor adjacent
Well,
to you is
it's
paying
all
up.
on my property, so I got 30 foot, I think it's 15-foot easement.
Right, and there are a few lots like that where the drain plows right through the middle, so that, there is
I
no,
don't think I should be paying for that if it's all the county, or if it's a county property.
right, right,
All right, that was my question, thank you.
thank you.
Alvin Werfel, 38201 Pine Ridge. Last 7 years, my garage has been flooding. 19 inches of water in the yard, 9 inches in the garage. My car freezes in the wintertime. You know, I can see what they have done so far, cleaning up. If it helps, fine. What if it doesn't? That's my concern. After all the people pay for the assessment, and if this doesn't correct the problem, then what? That's what I'm asking you.
Okay. I can answer that, regardless of, again, regardless of any work we do in the drains, if we don't have a place for that water to go, all that work in the drains would be wasted. So before we can do that, we have to begin at this point within the system. The work that was done behind your home isn't complete, that isn't the end. We know that throughout that whole system, there are drains that need to be demucked. But I can't start, let's just say, for example, let's say I started at the very tail, the very terminus of the drain, let's say, you know, over here, and it flows through your yard. If I started making it deeper there, and I kept making it deeper, and I stopped working by your house, I'd have a pool by your house. I have to start at that lower point and work, just like arteries, I have to work from the larger points and work back up in that system. There are, as I mentioned, there are critical places. We know that there are areas where, due to debris or due to irresponsible neighbors or whatever that might be, there are areas where we're pitching down and all of a sudden we have a high spot and it sits there. Those are areas that we're saying at this point are critical areas.
My concern is, how long has this pump not been working?
Well, it's never not worked, it's that we had two pumps, one has failed, and we've had a patchwork of temporary pumps
But
to make up
how
for
long
it.
has this pump not been working?
Years, I mean,
Or
Dave
why
could probably
hasn't-
say.
Why hasn't this been addressed before?
We've talked about this over several phases and several boards.
Mr.
And-
Verkust, if I may, and I can answer some of that question for you. So, some of the questions you're asking is, what are we going to do if this doesn't work? One of the biggest things is Mr. Verkust pointed out, if we cannot pump or eject the water from the retention ponds, there's a retention pond along Maple Forest, and
I understand that. My concern is, after you rebuild all these pumps and everything, and if that doesn't correct the problem, my property keeps flooding every year, then what?
then we continue on. This is not the say all end all. The drains that we are cleaning out, the Public Works is. I've been here. Will be my 19th year in August. And Public Works, I understand. I've been to your house. I've been to your house personally many times. I've personally been to your home.
And my second question is, what pertains to where it says you're assessed with public and without public? Nobody's addressed this at all tonight.
Well, I can answer that. So initially, when we began this process, we realized that depending on how you look at it, 15 to 20%, I thought the number was closer to 15, but let's just say for the number today isn't necessarily critical. If we look at this area, 893 acres, there are roads that run through that, and as we all know, the curb isn't the edge of your property. That edge of your property is maybe 10 or 15 feet from the curb or the shoulder of the road or wherever the road ends. So you've got some rather large acreage that's not yours, it's not mine, it's technically ours, but it's overseen by the Department of Roads. So there was a question we had internally as to whether or not we had the authority to levy that per acre cost on the roads to the Department of Roads. And what we learned is we do not have that authority. The county does have that authority, but the county has a record of not levying that cost. The idea being that it's kind of like taking money from one pocket and giving it to the other. If you say, well, the Department of Roads has to pay their share, that's that much less money they have to
Okay.
contribute.
My concern is, what pertains, it says with public or without.
Right, so the public property, there's three types of public property within this area. Township-owned property, county-owned property, and school
So how-
district-owned property.
My question is my public property with public, or is it without?
Right now, it appears that we will not be able to levy this special assessment on the public property. So in the alternative, we've gone to those agencies and asked them to contribute voluntarily. So the Department of Roads is not required, and we cannot force them to help to pay for this. But we're making a good faith effort in conjunction with Public
So
Works
how-
to ask them to contribute their share.
You got the price here though, with public or without, and I'm asking you, is my property with or without?
The cost is likely to be without public property, but since
So I'm
that
not-
letter went out,
It's likely, but you're not saying it is or it is
no,
not.
it is not. There is no public property. We cannot levy them. However,
So everybody's property is without public then? Am I
that's,
right?
that's
Am
true.
I right?
Hang on, that's true.
Then why
However,
why do you even put with public property then?
we didn't realize whether we had that authority,
It was
but in
in the
addition,
attorney's
in the meantime, sir, what we've done is, although we learned we can't levy them, we're asking them to contribute their share so that it'll be closer to the width.
Mr. Ricust, if I may take just 1 minute to hopefully clarify some things for some of the residents here. The slides you showed, that were shown by Mr. Newmer, showing the drains coming into the retention areas where the Beechwood Storm Station is. Folks, you have to understand, these retention ponds are large bodies of water. They're very deep, very long, and so what happens is all of these drains flow to these retention ponds, and these are like a holding vessel for the water. Not to mention the Harrison Relief Drain pipe underneath of the drain, the retention pond, I'm sorry. So what happens, the gentleman asked, what are we going to do if this doesn't work? We have sort of, in a makeshift way, with my erector set of pumps that we've had out there trying to keep this going, we've proven to many residents that I've dealt with through the years that by us throwing every pump we have at it like that, pumping it down as fast as we can, their water receded much faster or didn't climb to near the level it did when we didn't have those there. What you have to understand is those levels of those retention ponds are very deep as opposed to the level of the drains I've heard almost every resident talk about that are very shallow now. Even if they're 4 foot deep, that's a third, maybe an eighth of what the depth of these retention ponds are. These retention ponds are, some of them are 18 feet deep, 16 foot deep, and they're large bodies of water, not to mention the large diameter pipe that's holding the water under there. So when we get that water out of there, that means the water that's in your backyards, in these drains, gets there faster, then the pumps will then get it out of there faster.
Yep.
So I hope that clarifies a little bit of how this works.
My name is Janet Lammerman. I live at 39239 Memory Lane. I think my only problem is I realize the water problem has gotten worse. And we have some, new developments, and don't get me wrong, I don't have any, problems with new homes and stuff like that. But I don't understand if these pumps were only capable of taking up so much cubic feet, and why would this have been addressed to the builder of all these new areas, all these new homes that are being built? it's like, I agree with the gentleman that said it should be the builder's problem. I've lived there for 40 years, and now all of a sudden, we have this problem, and we're all paying for it, when if the problem has existed for a long time with these pumps, it should have been addressed to the builders before any new development were set up.
Understood. So maybe a couple points to that. One way in which we try to address that, and it's required by law, is when you do develop a parcel of land, a large parcel that we might consider where a subdivision might go in, or single unit, site condos, that sort of thing. Detention and drainage is, first and foremost, is a part of their plan. So they don't just get to hook up a pipe and dump all their drain water in. That's number one. Number two, in the end, the people who live in that new development are paying that share. If we had said to the builder, let's just say we had the ability to see into the future and say, 6-8 years from now, we're gonna assess this parcel of land $80,000, which is what we did in the woods of Glenmar in '03. But let's say we looked to another area and said, okay, we need $100,000. In the end, that cost would be passed on to every person that bought a home within that area. And the same cost is ultimately falling on that land, which is why we assess by acreage. But as opposed to that builder paying it, it's your neighbor that's paying it. In other words, whoever owns a chunk of land and whatever size their land is, when we do this action, whoever owns that land pays. If you sell your home before we're done, the new guy that owns it pays, so.
Right, so, okay, so the people that have lived in Harrison Township forever, that have the bigger lots, we're the ones that are being punished, we're the ones that have to pay
Well,
more.
Right, that's, I understand your
And
point,
it's
we're all paying the same
without
share.
The higher price, without public. So, I don't know. Thank you.
My name's Corinne Sherrill. I live at 38795 Pine Ridge. I have a triple lot. I have .857 acres.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Sorry. I have .857 acres of triple lot. My property every spring floods. I've been a resident of Harrison Township for 21 years. I love living in Harrison Township. Obviously, there's a problem and it does need to be taken care of, even though some people can't appreciate the work that is being done on it. My questions are, maybe you should not have put in the school or the road commission's requests because it caused a lot of problems. You didn't include, like, when you did the request, if they have a time frame when they're supposed to respond to how much they're gonna contribute. I understand you're waiting for the attorney to let you know, but it would be nice to know the figures were included if they were, if there was a time frame. Also, I have another question is, okay, we're gonna do this fix. How long is it gonna last? If we have people keep building in Harrison Township, are the pumps gonna be sufficient? That's my question. So, I mean, it looks over the years, we've done several patches, but we wanna make sure it's gonna be done right and it's gonna last a long time, cause I like living in Harrison Township. I wanna stay here. And also, if you don't like Harrison Township, you are more than welcome to move. You can go somewhere else and live. I love Harrison Township. I am for this. I do want it to be fixed. I'm not happy about paying for it, but if it's gonna fix it sooner than not, then so be it. And I do have almost an acre, so I am at the higher end. I would like to hear what Mr. York has to say about the general fund and also the 10% contingency. If there is anything left, what will it be used for, or will it be refunded? And I'm really nervous, I'm sorry. The amount that was in the paperwork that you sent out to us, I just wanted to be sure that the amount wasn't gonna go higher. Cause I probably will have to use the 5-year plan. I'm a single mom, but again, I love living in Harrison Township. And my house is not a new construction. It was built in 1930. So just so you're aware, it's not a new construction. And maybe suggest, we should increase the storm drain allotment for Harrison Township because obviously it's not enough. And if it has to increase their taxes, so be it, because obviously it's a problem. All these people are complaining that they have drain problems. Also, I wanna know when the next meeting is about the roads, cause the roads suck.
So.
That's for another meeting.
Yep, so, one question regarding future building in the township, for these drainage districts that we're talking about, there really isn't a large, I mean, there may be an individual lot, you know, meaning, you know, maybe you, like you said, maybe you own more than one lot, you might sell a portion of that and build, but in terms of a large portion of land that isn't built, that could be built, I don't believe, Dave, that we have any of that within this drainage district.
No, there's not a lot left to be developed, and also, when we did the sizing for the pumps, we did the hydraulic study. The hydraulic study encompassed the entire area, and we did look at the full build out of it. So if there was vacant land that could be subdivided and built, we, considered that to be built out for the purposes of the runoff.
To the
So
max
it's already been accounted for.
Sure. And then regarding the school property, again, this process, I,
understand the process, you
well-
don't have to elaborate, I'm just saying you didn't specify a time frame for them to respond.
right, we're early in that process. They can respond, I mean, this project isn't gonna be done and sent to you until, you know, sometime prior to winter taxes. So I don't have a final number of what I can ask you until I have a final answer from them, but they could tell me in June that they're willing to give me not the 60 we asked, but maybe they'll give us 45. We won't assess until we have that answer and the project is completed. And the contingency is merely money that this board approves to allow the project to move forward in case there is some change order, so that it doesn't stop and wait 2 weeks so that this board can come back and act. So, yep. Will it? No, understood. I was just trying to answer those questions. And I agree, roads suck. That's a whole other subject. We tried in 2014 to look at a millage to try to address that, and the voters turned it down, so.
Hi, I'm Gloria Kaminsky. I live at 37930 Hammond. My husband Mark and I, we've just moved in a year ago, actually this month, and we love it up here. We've been driving around in Harrison Township for 15 years looking, and just love this area. Thank you for the presentation. We thought it was wonderful, very clear, very easy to understand. This is our first meeting. Personally, yeah, from what we've seen from this presentation, obviously there's a problem. It does need to be taken care of. It looks like, I've been on boards before, so I've been a board member, so I know there's a lot of work that goes into what you guys have done, and I can tell that by all the information you all have given. So I really look forward to coming to more of the board meetings, and just learning more about the community here and being a part of it. So I appreciate that. We both appreciate that. So we would like to have that work done, obviously. We moved into a house that needed to really be fixed up. So all the money we got from selling our other house, we actually put into our new house. We have no money to pay for this. So obviously we're protesting to pay for this. So if we can get some money from you guys to pay for this, we'd really prefer it. But we would like to have it done because we really do love our house, and we do plan on staying here and having our grandchildren come and play in the area. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve McNabb. I live at 37945 Winkler. I live right on the ditch. I've been there 36 years. In 2011, it flooded the worst it's ever been. It was 3/4 of the way around my house, completely over my septic field. So I'm glad you're working on this. The only problem I have is the way that you've decided to pay for it. And I'm not sure that we should be paying for it. I'm willing to pay my fair share. But I'm being assessed at 1.3 acres. So that's about 1,300 and some bucks. My neighbor, she's got about 3 acres, and it doesn't drain hardly at all into that creek. You're gonna hit her for $4 grand. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. I went online and looked at these SAW grants, the stormwater management deal. Macomb County applied for 44 of them. And I apologize for these vague numbers, but they put out that between Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne County, they got somewhere between 16 million and 47 million. That's a pretty big spread. When I talked to Adam earlier, I kind of got the impression that Candace Miller was willing to take over this project. I don't know if I misunderstood, but if Candace is willing to do this, I'd kinda like to know how that would work, and, would we be assessed? Also, I'd like to know about the, since we're, put a letter in to protest, who would we protest to? Who's the tax tribunal? Is it gonna be you guys, or? I mean, who do we actually discuss our complaints with if we go to a tax tribunal? That's
Okay.
about it.
So, and you can hang out there, I tried to get all your questions. The SAW grant, again, we were successful in securing a total of 1.6 million for the SAW grant. The SAW grant cannot be spent on capital projects. It was only studies, engineering. We recently rebuilt a sanitary sewer lift station. The engineering was paid for with that SAW grant. So we're in the process of doing an asset management of the sanitary system. That's paid for, but that grant cannot fund the work. It can only fund the engineering.
You have to turn that money back?
No, we're spending we applied for it and are in the process of using the grant. What I'm saying is that money can't be used for the construction of this. It was used for the engineering, for the design of it. You'd asked, what if Public Works took it over? Well, they haven't expressed, there's a process by which you could petition them. But if that were the case, first of all, we would lose the grant. We'd have to cancel the contract. We would lose the grant, but they would do the same thing. They have the ability to levy special assessments also. So it isn't as if they have a pot of money that's accessible for this project. There isn't a spot where you're gonna see on your tax bill or some way in which you pay taxes where that money flows to them and they have a pot of money from which they can draw for this pump station. It's Harrison Township's pump station, it's not theirs. They have the ability to take it over and assess for it, but they would do the same thing that we would do. They would go out for bid, they'd come up with that cost, they'd divide that up on acreage. And I can't speak specifically to the tax tribunal, it's a separate process, but that's the same process you follow if you protest your assessed value. It isn't us, it is a body. There are, here in Macomb County, if it's commercial, you gotta go to Lansing, but that is really a separate process.
You have to go to Lansing?
No, that's for commercial property. I'm not in a position, I don't know if Rob is in a position to answer the question of what that process is, but in essence, you're arguing that you're not in the district or that you don't benefit from the work being done.
Hello, my name is Constance Wolf Hornack. I live at 27460 Coleridge with my husband, Bob. By the way, I want to say, Mr. Axel, you've talked to us on the phone before on things that have happened in our neighborhood, and you've always been very polite and considerate, and we respect that.
Thank you.
I only want to say a couple of things. I think everybody has pretty much covered it, but we live on the Saving Drain. It goes right through the middle of our property. We are in the North Point Hazel Coleridge. Next door to us is about 2.5 acres of, at one time, empty woodlands. It was purchased by Mr. Gilbert and is now being developed after several years. I just want to go on record and saying, in the 23 years that we've lived at this address, there has never, ever been anybody out to clean that drain from North Point Parkway to the corner of Hazel. My husband should be paid by the township or the county for all the work that he does to try to keep that water flowing and trying to keep the ditch cleared out from weeds and all the crap that goes flying and flowing down there. I think it's a health hazard myself. Anyway, I want that to be on record. No one has ever come from the township, the county, whatever, to clean any of that out. Before and I don't want to be harping, but I think it's important to say this, before the Glenmar Woods was developed, the water flowed. It might have rained, and I'm not kidding you, we have a lake in our backyard when it rains. The dogs swim. It's a lake. I could swim in it. And it goes down, it would go down. It's important to point out that the developer was allowed to reroute that water in Glenmar Woods. So we're not talking about the same situation. They rerouted it. And at the time, they were not required to put in sufficient pumping to accommodate for that. That's our understanding. We might be wrong, but that's what we believe. Because ever since then, our water does not move. It sits for days. And the only way we get it to move is my husband puts on his frickin' boots and he goes down to North Point and he spends 4 to 5 hours trying to clean out the frickin' culvert down there. So that's all I wanted to say. We are very supportive of the project. It's needed in the township, and it is a plus for the township. And even though we are begrudging it a bit, we're going to pay the money. What we are disappointed about is that the developer and the builder don't seem to be carrying their share of the load, and the whole township is now carrying the share of the load. So that's all we want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a point on that, there's 8 lots, I know that you pointed out Mr. Gilbert is owned, I think he may have sold some of those lots, but those are being assessed at the same cost per acre that your lot and my lot is. So there isn't a piece of land that's exempt from this process whenever it occurs. But I understand, you look and say, well, you know, when this happened, when that was developed, I saw a change. There's a lot of other factors, though, that are going into the reasons why. There's some other things. There's some redirection of other drains that are unrelated to that.
And I understand that.
Right, so,
I understand that.
and then the other thing is I agree with you. Your husband should be paid. What I can say is if I walk the drains, I see 2 things. I see folks I see scenarios where you can tell that the neighbors in that general area have really made an effort to keep that drain clean. And I can walk, and I walked it with Public Works folks, and we can walk down just a ways and you can tell someone just decided this is a place to put their grass clippings. So that it truly varies from place to place. And some folks have done a great deal of work to try to improve it, and some folks have, through almost laziness, made some efforts to really jam it up. So it really does vary, but we're appreciative of that.
I'm sorry, just briefly to touch on what you had mentioned about the drain and North Point Parkway and the drain there. Public Works, as you've seen, has done a great amount of work recently cleaning out these drains, and they are, I've been with Mr. Forlini, spoke with Mrs. Miller, and so on and so forth. This is, as we said.
And Department of Roads and Culverts, too.
Yes, that started today, as a matter of fact. All of these cross tubes here are going to be replaced and or cleaned, but this is just the beginning. Like I said, this isn't the whole thing in a nutshell. This is one phase of an ongoing thing now that we have some cooperation. As I said, I've been here, it'll be 19 years in August, and I've never had the cooperation with Public Works Office that I have now. It is refreshing.
Richard Raff, 27687 Owen Court. I object to paying for this. Firstly, if somebody could speak to, and I think it's already been alluded to, that if you come up here from Pine Ridge or Winkler, if this is pumps rebuilt, it's not going to necessarily reduce their problem, because if all the ditches are full, if the culverts are 50 or 80% full, that's not going to change. You know, they're not going to suddenly not have water in their backyard. So being in support of it, just keep in mind that we're only just going back to where we were 5 years ago with regard to the pump. And Ken, you're right, you got to start at the bottom, but the roads and the drains are a multi-million-dollar project. It is far outside the scope. I have a question. If I have a 0.4 acre lot, am I being assessed at 0.45 or 0.25?
Yep, it's a direct calculation of exact acreage. Those numbers were listed to give, if your lot is in this size, this would be. So yours will be based on literally 0.4 acres. When this project's done, we're gonna have acreage, we're gonna have a final cost, we're gonna have a cost per acre, and that calculation will be as accurate as we can make it to actual acreage.
Okay.
Can I interrupt you for one moment, Mr. Rapp? Just
Yeah.
so I can clarify something about your yard in particular. I was talking to this lady over here. The area where Mr. Rapp and I don't, Jane Hamilton, Mrs. Hamilton. I believe that their homeowners association owns this portion of this district.
There's certain wetlands, yeah.
Are they going to be assessed that acreage to their homeowners association and to their lots?
Yes.
It's however the homeowner association wishes to pay. We've had some homeowners associations that have expressed an
See
interest.
that, Rich? That's that area.
I can tell you the
well-
homeowners association will not pay for it, we do not have funds to pay for it, it will be.
Right, and everyone's
I
different.
just want
is
to
what-
clarify that.
So there's some homeowner associations that will pay it out of their fund balance. There are some that would either do a special assessment or ask that we levy it directly against the properties.
We'll ask you to levy it directly against the properties,
It's
as a
gonna
board
be-
member of the Willow Bay subdivision. We do not have the money because certain homeowners don't pay their share,
Those 22 homes or 20 homes will pay significantly more than,
significantly.
and so I kind of got distracted. Also, with regard to the 118, I know it's not a lot of money, but that's been somewhere for 14 years, and 6 of it, interest rates are pretty good. I mean, was that at 118 or was that 70 plus interest over 14 years? I'm curious as to.
118.
It was 118, so,
The check was for 118.
okay, has that been sitting in somebody's bank account, and it wasn't mine? For how many years, you know, I mean, compounded, I know in the past 6, 7 years, it's not been a whole lot of money, but, so, is there any, it's not, like I said, it's not gonna be a ton of money, but it's deep into 5 figures with regard to interest over that many years. I don't know why is there interest with regard to that?
Yeah, it isn't accounted for separately, but certainly the board at their discretion could choose to allocate some amount greater than the 118. The point for the letter was to say that 118,000 has been allocated or set aside on behalf of this project. As far back as 2003, I got copy of the check, you know, the details on it. But as to how much comes from general fund, it's at the will of this board. So I can't tell you we're gonna allocate $1 or $100,000, but it's a part of the discussion this board should have, and it's part of why we want this public input at this phase to say, well, maybe we should account for something greater than the 118. But as it's set in a fund, it wasn't sitting and accounted for in a separate means to know what accrual occurred during that time for just that fund of money.
Which leads to my last comment. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are in favor but don't want to pay for it, and there's a lot of people that are opposed to paying for it and not in favor, period. Crazy suggestions, splitting the baby and having, you know, general fund. Some portion, 20, 30, 50% come from general fund, and then say, okay, everybody else, you gotta, you know, kick in. Because I agree with a lot of the people that say, well, just as a thought, I mean, if the road floods, I mean, we're in a much worse condition, you know, in Willow Bay if drain doesn't work, but if the road floods and you're coming from Bridgeview and you wanna go through there, well, you benefit from that drain as well, because you can't get through that road, and it's minimal compared to us who would, have a significant damage, but again, I mean, just kind of thrusting it all, and $118,000 kicked in, and that's creating most of the problem is the development, but it was only $100,000. That doesn't even have an interest, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ron Rabine, 37815 Winkler. I do protest not wanting to pay it. I'm sure by being in the zone, it sounds like there's no way you cannot say you're not in the zone, so that, I guess, would be out. I don't think I'll waste any time on any tribunal there. I do think it needs to be addressed. I'm thrilled it's being addressed in one way or another. My concern being a pump guy is that I know there's a way that pump, you can get a pump in any length head. 208 is not that much less efficient than 240. It's still there. I sell machinery all over the Detroit area, so that stuff all neither here nor there. So I do think we could do a lot of spreading of it, because I do totally agree that when that pump is done, it is not gonna change the backyards of most people because the water's not getting there. You admit it's a drop in the bucket, this is, compared to getting all those drains to flow. Somehow I got a feeling that just after I'm done paying this, I'm going to get a triple the bill to dig my ditch, because that's not there, so I'm kinda looking into the future. Okay, I'll pay this one, but I really don't wanna pay that one, so you know it's a problem, figure it out between now and then. And if the money was spread around a little bit right now and got some of that flow going and a pump was retrofitted there, I still think the overall system could be there. And it really does concern me that that system was obviously overwhelmed, designed to take care of only that lower third quadrant, and everything has been redirected to it without obviously never a thought of upping that system while one and then another was diverted to it, and a pump failed somewhere in the middle of all that. That is way before your time, I admit, and stuff like that, but whoever, whether it was a builder or should have been, or no building should have been allowed till somehow we did all that back then, I just wish it had been, but thanks for the effort.
Thank you. We have been talking about it since before I was supervisor, and the first act I did was to go to Public Works, and we were blackmailed, so we've been working on other methods, and one of the things that helped us is getting a grant, so it helped us to move forward, so.
Hello, my name's Terry Horton. I live at 38451 Elmite, and I'm here with my husband Drew. I agree a pump station's needed. I object to paying for the assessment. We did not receive the postcard, so we did, and unfortunately believe we were paying 5 times the amount given in the original letter. From your demonstration, it looks like the Harrison relief drain is what is going into this pump station. Is that what I understand?
The Harrison relief drain collects water from the Petticonlet, Savan,
Oh, no, that's
and
okay. No, that's fine.
Venter de Buff. It collects water from all 3 of those drains and then conveys it down to the pump station.
Right. The Harrison Relief added the flow of the 2 additional drainage districts when we had the diagram.
Right.
Originally, the 350 acres, that was Venter de Buff. That's where the pump station is, so it accepts the Venter de Buff flow. But when we added that vertical underground drain, 20, 30 years ago, whatever that was, that took additional flow from 2 other areas, and then when we reversed the Pettit Conlet, that added some yet additional flow into this.
Okay, so I went in and I looked in Harrison Township today on my break. And all the people in this letter, a few are from Area 11, whatever that is. Most of us are Area 12. But it looks like it's taking the water from way over by Bridgeview and all of those areas and bringing it down. I don't understand why they're not helping pay for this if it's gonna be an assessment.
Every lot has a pre-established, recorded at the Public Works office, which way their drain flows, whether it's sheet drainage, whether there's a road drain, whether there's a culvert there, it goes somewhere.
So
the only people who are paying are only those people whose water flows through this. If
So
you're,
the only people that are having it go from Hazel
Nope.
to Town Hall.
it goes all the way to Shoreline.
And Shoreline is what number though?
Well, Shoreline, it's not all of Shoreline, but the Pettit Conlet crosses Shoreline. Once it crosses Shoreline, if you go to the backyards of Shoreline, Canterbury, that subdivision, if you're right, they put in a detention pond that dumps directly into South River, to the Clinton River, I mean, right, you kind of cross right there, just east of Shoreline, right? They are the end of the district. Canterbury's not a part of it because their drain water does not flow westerly toward this pump station. It flows northerly out the Pettit Conlet. That is by design the high point.
They had a special assessment when this was done?
No, that pond would have been required to be built, and that cost would have ultimately been spread amongst every lot. In other words, if you and I developed it, we come to the township, and the township says, well, before you can build on this land, you need the equivalent of 2 inches of rainwater over this area, and it needs to go somewhere, so your pond needs to be X by X or hold such a volume of water. Once you get that plan approved, now you have to build that pond and put in those storms, and obviously, if we wanted to make money, we'd have to take that cost and divide it by every lot we sold. So in their case, they paid for it in the same way that, it's built into the cost of the lot.
But it does appear that it's just a small section of the area because this is the last stop before it goes out to the next spot, is paying for it. It's just a small area of that whole Harrison relief drain. And I thought it was odd in your letter and very confusing because you went at .45 instead of doing a half. You went a quarter, then you put a .4. That was the oddest thing I've ever seen.
Well, we did that because we added up every parcel and figured out what the median parcel was. So typically, no one develops .45 acres. That was the average acreage. But there's more, I mean, no matter how you do it,
Right.
you know, you can take the acre and then take your, if your lot is .31, you're gonna pay .31 times whatever the
But
acre
the
is.
rest of them were 25, it should have been 25.50, even though 45 is the normal, because it's still gonna give you an estimated amount. My other, sorry, I know the buzzer went off, but
That's
there's
fine.
been a conversation. The money collected, okay, so we know there's, well, it depends what you're looking at, because I have seen a couple times when we're $10,000 off on what the paper handed out in this. So if you say there's $844,000 cost, and $108,000 or $118,000 that we have, that's $736,123. You know how many properties there are. How much is that amount? I mean, did you figure it out to the penny? Is
No.
that how you did it?
Nope, and the reason is we can't. What we have to do, we can only estimate right now. Well, we have a bid from Body for 708,000. I can almost guarantee it won't be 708. Might be 695, might be 735. But until that project is done, we don't know what that final amount is. So there are some costs we know, there's some we don't know. We're not sure, for example, this board hasn't voted to decide how much of the general fund dollars we might allocate to this project. So until all those things are done, the best I can do is give you an estimate, and we gave you that estimate assuming that we don't get help from anybody else, and we, the township, from the general fund, don't contribute anything. We do that to make it an artificially high number, so that we later don't come back and ask you for more, but we fully expect to come back and ask for less.
On the Wade Trim document, page 2, it quotes, it says, "Conditions for the grant require township to award a contract for construction on May 7th, 2017. When did we apply for that?
The grant was originally applied for in 2014.
2014, and so I have to agree with the gentleman, for 2 years, and now we're down to, in a week, you're gonna vote, you're gonna have to award your grant.
It's already, work's already been awarded. The project is, the contract is awarded.
But the board hasn't agreed to pay for it?
The board has agreed that the project needs to be done. It has been a discussion over several years amongst the board throughout this engineering process that we believe the appropriate way to do it is a special assessment. We're voting on that, and as you heard Mr. York say, not every board member agrees with that, but a majority of board members voted to move forward with the special assessment process, which is what we're in the process of. But awarding the work, applying for the grant, it's a whole process. Getting approval to do the work is itself, for example, one large delay in this was that we had to jump through quite a few hoops just to get access from Metro Parkway. So currently, as I mentioned, we have to come in through Beechwood, which is private access. So now we're going to be able to access this with trucks and maintenance equipment from Metro Parkway. But we needed permission to get in from Metro Parkway, which, believe it or not, is a lot harder than you'd think.
I worked for a manufacturer's rep, I know a lot about that stuff. My point is, you couldn't have even told us in January when you were asking these questions that you were gonna make us a special assessment? I mean, I'm just very disappointed. And my last question is, do you lose the grant if Harrison Township pays for the pump station?
No, the grant is done. We cannot lose the grant, we've awarded the project. If we were to cancel the project now, that would be the only way we could lose that grant. But we've had, let me just say that, again, as one resident pointed out, I mean, we can talk about 2003. I wasn't on the board, but in 2003, the Board of Trustees at that time said to a builder, you need to give us $118,000 toward this. This discussion has been ongoing for several years. When I became supervisor, as I mentioned, 2011, started the process of trying to get money. We were blackmailed. We've gone through a lot of iterations. We applied for and received that grant, I believe it was 2014, and we began that process. But each of these steps has taken time.
Thank you.
Can I clarify something? Ken? As far as the grant goes, the only part of that grant that we're using for this project is $68,000 for the engineering, or
87.
well, whatever, you've been saying 68,000 for a long time, so that's what's in my head.
Okay.
So, the other $1 million of the project is for sewer projects. So, that $1 million really doesn't mean anything, it's $68,000 is what we're talking about for this portion of project, which is only the engineering costs.
Hi, Marcia Peckman, 37909 Winkler, 20-year resident of Harrison Township. I love it here, but I am rejecting this. I know it needs to be done, but I have probably close to 3 acres. I will be paying a ton. I have no drainage ditch in the front of my property nor the back. I have no culvert, and it's never been there. My yard floods, it has nowhere to go. Doesn't flood near the street. Other people have ditches, I have nothing. So if this were to go through, are they gonna put in a ditch for me and run it from the back of my property to the front so that my water drains? Cause if not, this is a waste. I will put my house up for sale and move. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Yeah, there is no work involved in doing drainage on individual properties. There's nothing allocated for that.
No, I have a problem. I stood there and Carrie got up there and spoke and you addressed every single question she had, but when others of us get up there, you wait till we get done with our whole list and then you answer like 2 or 3 of the questions.
And if I miss something, I apologize. I'm doing my best. If there's something I missed, feel free to.
Way past her time with each question. You gave her ample time and then we stand up there and you don't have anything to say.
And honestly, I mean, if there's a question I missed, I'm happy to answer it. I am doing my best, and I've got some folks.
Already decided to pay for this, is that, I mean, with the assessment, how much time does someone, I'm not one of those people, but if they're going to appeal it, what is their time frame?
So I'll answer. The board, let me just back up this. Understood. No, that's okay. So let's back up. Just as a general observation, although I've heard obviously various comments, I'm comfortable in saying by a large majority, folks have said they agree with the work. Not everybody agrees, but I would say a majority of folks said, yep, we need this pump station. And that's reflective of this board. So some of us have been on the board longer than others, but as far back as anyone's been on this board, we've been talking about this subject, and I would say it's pretty universal that we've all agreed the work has to get done, right? So for us to apply for the grant and talk about this back in 2014 and have a workshop with presentations from the engineer, we were all in, we were convinced. So we moved forward the engineering. When it came time to source the work, about the only issue we had was really a delay relative to whether or not we were gonna get some participation. But we've never hesitated on the process of saying, let's get this source, let's move it forward, let's do that work. It has to be done, right? How do we pay for it? The discussion has been at several meetings to talk about a special assessment. But there is a specific legal process to a special assessment. We have to start that. We haven't even, so what we did so far is we've called for this public hearing and done a notification per the law, which brings a lot more people than we normally see at a meeting. Based on that notification, folks have the chance to come forward. When we're done with that public hearing, then we close the public hearing. Then we will at some point go into a process of deliberation to make a decision to move forward with that SAD. If and when we do that, there's something you can protest. But you can't really protest an SAD today because we haven't done one. We're just in the
I
process.
understand, but if I don't know, I know hardly any of them know the process. That's why I'm asking for clarification.
Clarification regarding,
Just with the processes, you just.
to protest?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a petition process. So the law, PA 197, says if 51% of the people come to us, if everyone on your street says, we want our road repaved, we're seeing a lot of that lately. And 51% of the people, 51 or greater, obviously, a majority, simple majority, say, we want our road repaved, we repave the road. The other 49%, whether they agree or not, doesn't happen, it moves forward, that's the law, and we force that payment on them. In this case, we're using the same process, but if 20% of the people in this district protest, then it stops the process until we would have to collect 51% of, is that?
Thank you. I understand.
Okay.
I understand every word. I just wasn't sure.
Okay. Sure.
Now, do we know the date of that yet? The statute, I read the statute, and like the second gentleman, Mr. Thoen, he referred to, the statute just says that the petitions have to be done before the meeting. It doesn't really specify what meeting, just for the record. Because I read the statute, that's why I keep asking about the state. I think that the petition process is done at this point. That's why people keep bringing it up, just so you know. So it's real important, we need to know whether anybody can go out and get a petition right now or not. I don't know. It's very vague, verbiage.
Where do we pick up the petition?
Well,
Yeah, it's the clerk's office. The clerk's office assists with that. Mr. Witt's office handles that.
They didn't have one when I
Well,
went.
We don't
there-
have them just laying around,
It's-
it's something that has to be requested in general.
Yeah, if you came and said, I'd like a petition that says, I object to this for these reasons, we'd have to draft that. I mean, it could be, you could come in and say, I want it, like, as I say, we'd like to repave our road. You have to say what you wanna do and how you wanna do it, and then we'll help you prepare that so that it satisfies PA 197, so.
188.
Well, that one too, sorry.
Do you think there's enough time to request?
From my understanding, I don't see how you could could have protested something yet that doesn't exist yet, so I believe.
very vague, isn't it?
Mr. Supervisor.
And it says, exact said before the meeting. And today's the meeting.
Okay.
So the petition should have been filed before this meeting.
Yeah, that's not my understanding, sir.
Mr. Booth, would you like to review it?
I'm reading in front of me, thank you, you're a lawyer, I'm sure you know it very well,
I do.
thank you.
If we could, though, move on, ma'am.
Diane Phone, 38.
Can't hear you.
Diane Phone?
Can't, is that mic on?
No. 38701 Town Hall. I'm objecting to the special assessment. I don't object to maintaining the infrastructure of the township, but it just seems to me that, just over the years when we've had, other infrastructure, issues, that there's arbitrary, ways of funding it. What comes to mind is this water main, a water main needed to be enlarged. I think it was to the Huron Point area. And there was some discussion, as maybe about 10 years ago, about making that a special assessment, and then it was decided not to. I'm assuming that main was enlarged because they couldn't flush their toilets or something. But I believe it ended up at the township just paid for it. Well, okay, so that's me. And then looking back at the history of these pump stations, were those paid for by special assessments when these pump stations were added to or amended? I'm assuming they were not. So I'm afraid there's a precedent possibly starting here where this board is having us pay for at least pump stations. If another pump station should fail, I'm assuming there's more than one in the township, is that gonna be a special assessment? You know, another board is probably going to handle it differently. So I feel a little, I'm not happy with the arbitrariness of how these matters are handled. I also think that it's, as the gentleman before us who dealt with pumps, I do think it's a leap of faith that these people are, you know, I don't want standing water. I'm sure that's a terrible thing, flooding and such, on their properties, but, I'm afraid that their good intention of paying for this is not gonna resolve that. It seems to me that the problem they're having is the water isn't getting to the pump station. And if you're gonna start messing around, clearing out those drains, then I'm really nervous about that because, right now, we don't have a problem. We do not have any standing water, and I don't want that to change. And I'm afraid that when you start incrementally, clearing out these drains, that I am going to have a problem like some of these other people mentioned as developments and such went on, that all of a sudden now they've got a big problem on their hands. So I do think there's a leap of faith there, that their water is not, is going to start draining just because we put in a new pump station. I do have a question though, if this should go through and we are, you know, made a special assessment district and we pay the taxes and what all, is that assessment going to be added to our assessed values on our future tax bills? I will really have a cow about that. It just seems to me that, you know, these kinds of structures should be depreciated or something, because you know they're gonna have to be replaced and maintained over the years. And, you know, I would object to having to pay the tax, the assessment, and then continue to be taxed because of a so-called improvement to my property. It just seems to me that the township is responsible for these costs, and I'm not happy with the special assessment district, so. I hope you can answer the question about your
Yep.
assessment.
Yep, so, the only way that that this could affect the assessment, the assessed value of your property would be if there was truly an improvement. This is a maintenance project, so we're not doing something that didn't otherwise exist. Admittedly, this portion of the infrastructure is in need of improvement, but it was there before. So I don't think I could justifiably say that the value of your home went up because I repaired an existing pump station. So the answer to your question is no. In terms of an assessment, we can't say that we've improved your project. Say you had a gravel road and we paved the road, or the residents voted. That's obviously an improvement to the value. That would change the value. But this isn't a change in that sense. The other question, or the point I guess that you said that I think is worth noting is this is certainly not the only storm station that's been paid for through a special assessment district. I apologize if you mentioned your length of residency, but the Huron Point subdivision, Lake Shore, those areas, you may recall in the early 90s, they repaved that whole area and incorporated a pretty extensive storm sewer system, including pumps. And those costs were borne by the homeowners at that time. So the installation of pump stations to help with storm water being paid for through a special assessment it certainly isn't common. It's not something we do on an annual basis, but it's not new in Harrison Township or in any other community. So.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Noyes. The last name is Noyes. My address is 38310 Willamere Street. I'm a little bit north of the pumping station, but I purchased my home in 2011, and I'm on my third sub pump. My sub pump goes off every 3 minutes. And now I've learned that you can actually change the on and off switch and get that repaired. But my situation is the ditch, which, you know, is owned by Macomb County, is not cleaned out, which I would be happy to clean out if the water would flow from Metro Parkway to South River. The water just sits there. My neighbor has a drain across the street. We called Macomb County. I even tried to get Channel 7 involved. They cleaned it out. Within 24 hours, the water was full up to the top. So the situation is not cleaning so much the drains out or a combination, but the water is not flowing out. So I understand the situation with the pub sump, you know, the station, and you know, this is part of an ongoing bigger problem, but I'm in protest of the assessment at $400. I'm on a half an acre of a situation that's not going to help me when I don't even own the property by the street, by my ditch, you know, which I would be happy to pay for, you know, if it would help the water flow. I mean, the water just sits around my house. It's just, it's a continuous problem. The water, we're not resolving the problem. It's just stopped there at the house. The sub pump goes on every 3 minutes, and the water is not flowing out. So why should I pay $400 for property that's not owned by me? I pay my property taxes. It should be covered in there. I think this is a situation between Macomb County and Harrison Township. You know, and you're saying, your assessment is saying that this is not going to guarantee that the water is going to flow. So I have to pay for something on a what if is gonna work and not gonna help my situation and all my neighbors, because we're all in the same, my whole neighborhood is in the same boat. We're all just sitting on water, the water just sits there, all our sub pumps go off every 3 minutes. So why would I want to pay for something that's not going to even help address? Because you're not saying that you guarantee that this is gonna help my situation. You know, you got all this new construction going on, and you're trying to accommodate, you know, all this new construction. Why would I have to pay for something that's not gonna help my situation when I already pay my property taxes? So for property that I don't even own, Macomb County owns it. I've called Macomb County, I've called the water department, I've called Harrison Township. I had Channel 7 investigate, and nobody can do anything. And I find it very disappointing that we have all these, you know, government officials that just can't do anything to help someone like me that pays my property tax. And I can't do anything about the situation. I would be happy to pay to have the ditch, you know, cleaned out every year if the water's gonna flow. The water doesn't flow. So how is this gonna help me? Do you think I should pay for something that's not guaranteed? When you go to the store, don't you pay for something, you get it? I don't wanna pay for something on a what if, or this is part of the process, so I'm gonna have to pay another $400 next year to address the ditch situation or the water flow. I mean, this is only gonna address the Beechwood pump station. It's not gonna address my situation now. So, okay, I'm gonna be paying more money later. So, I'm in protest of the assessment.
I guess I feel like maybe restating that this isn't the end of this work, but a $700,000 project, this board member, and I'm giving my opinion, and as you saw, some board members may disagree, that's a large sum of money to spread across the township on a fund balance of 2.7? Right. 2.7 million. Because there's no dollars that we pay to the county for storm pumps. That pump is owned by the township, but those drains that run through our township, it isn't a question of ownership, it's a question of where does that source of money come from. Let me give you an example. I do not want to pay for the drains in Warren, but the guy in Warren should not have to pay for my drains. So there is no overarching tax for drains. So that can be a tax in the form of a millage that we pay, property tax, and as I mentioned earlier, we don't collect a general fund property tax, so I can't take it from the fire department to pay for it. So we could say, well, let's just vote in a tax and trust me, I'll clean out your drain. Or another way to do it is a special assessment where you're only paying for something that benefits your district. Now beyond that, once that work is done, we're not finished with the work. We want to continue to work upstream from that low point up through the drains to continue to demuck them, to get rid of woody debris. We have partnership with Public Works, we talked about that, we haven't had that in the past. But if I do that demucking without this, it does us no good. If I go to the county and I say to the Department of Roads, I'd like to see this drain cleaned out, they're gonna get to a point where they're gonna say, well, I can scoop in between, but you've got 8 culverts here that have collapsed and they're not flowing. They don't take ownership of those culverts. Now, we can talk about some other kind of a project to say, let's go through and try to fix culverts. But if you just fixed yours, it's not fair that I'm gonna use tax dollars to fix his or hers or someone else's. So there's a lot of moving parts to the problem you described, but we're going to the head of the problem with this pump station. There's no question it has to be redone. Are you going to see immediate results? I don't know. I can't tell you that. There isn't a guarantee. Right, but we're gonna continue to work through this process until we see more and more results. Someone's gonna see results right away with this. Someone's gonna say, well, I don't see anything different, or maybe it's a wet year and they're gonna walk away and say, well, I think things are worse. Improving this pump station is not gonna make anything worse. It's going to make improvements, and it's gonna make it possible for us to continue to do improvements. Without it, it's silly for us to spend much money at all demucking drains.
But I don't own the pump station, or I don't own the property in front of my
Understood. I don't own an interstate, but we pay for, those are public things. Those drains and those roads are public things that we pay for one. Right, but you don't pay us a tax, so I can't do that. You or I don't pay a tax to the township or a tax to the county to pay for that work. So if there's no funding source, the work can't be done. If I call 911, police or fire respond, we pay for that. It's clearly defined.
So in the past then, if we're not charged a separate tax for that, how come all of a sudden now we have to be charged a special tax for this?
Well, you were asking about ownership. There is no other vehicle, I was trying to explain, there isn't that other vehicle to fund it where you mentioned you pay taxes. There isn't a tax that covers this. That's what I was trying to say. There's more than one way to pay for public improvements, and one of them is a broad-based tax. Another one would be special assessment, and that's what we're.
Who's been paying the pumping station all these years then? If I haven't been.
We operate it, we maintain it. So as I mentioned, right now, we're spending upwards of $50,000 a year for fuel, for repairs to the pumps, for overtime to refuel pumps during wet weather events. The township is bearing that cost. That is one of the things we do. $700,000, majority of the board has said we think that's best done through a special assessment. Which is how we got to this point and went through the notification. Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Eileen Lynn, 25469 Cortez Street. We really don't have a problem with all this. I feel sorry for all these people that have that. My question is, when my husband went to the township offices after we got this notice, they couldn't show me that we were actually part of this district. Now, your parents live across the street from us, okay? Okay, yes. And I don't see, our property is one of the first ones listed on this list. And when he went to the township offices, they couldn't show us that we were part of this whole district, so I was wondering why we got it.
And Dave would be the best to be able to show that on the slide, maybe for his PowerPoint, but
But all of Cortez, or just? Okay.
Here's the sheet.
Because, yeah, that was one thing, and then also, we have over an acre, so in other words, this price just doesn't stop at an acre, it's an acre plus, so it's, how much is it per, I mean, say we have an acre and a half, so we'd be paying the acre plus the half acre type of thing?
yep, so that's a good question, and that's a point that's been proposed. I know the one lady in attendance had described that she had a 3-acre parcel. It is the pleasure of this board only, so I'm not going to say this is what we will do or what we won't do. What I could use as a reference is in the past, just as recently as last summer, a group of folks came in on a particular street in the township, and they said, we'd like to repave our road. And I'm going by just rough memory here, but let's just say over 90% of the people had, say, 75-foot wide lots. But at the very end of the street, there were folks that were on the main road, and their frontage on their side yard might have been 150 feet or 200 feet deep. So they were paying a really large portion. Whereas at the end, there were some pie-shaped lots. So the board has the ability in a special assessment to take a look at those things. So for example, we could say, we're gonna cap that assessment at 1.25 acres, or 1 acre, or some arbitrary number. And whatever that overage is, we'll divide that equally amongst the rest of all the lots so that there's a cap. It's a process of picking winners and losers, but admittedly, when you get to a scenario where someone says, well, I have 3 acres, and that's clearly outside the scope of the majority of the other properties, you're burdening that person. The tricky part about trying to do that is, do you get into a legal challenge where if I own an apartment complex, I say, well, I have 15 acres, I want to be capped. And you say, well, no, wait a minute, that's a totally different story. So it's difficult to surgically cut out or design a mechanism that caps that. So,
Okay, so this is not capped, in other words, at 1 acre?
the way it's been proposed is it is true acreage. And the difficult thing is if you do look at a commercial parcel, maybe a 15-acre apartment, should they have to contribute the equivalent of 15 acres, or should they be capped at 1? That's where it gets a
Okay,
little
so
tricky.
this is not capped, so it would be
Correct.
more than that?
Correct, and
Okay.
your property is 0.62 acres.
Pardon me?
0.62 acres for the address.
No, it's more than that.
Based on the assessment, based on the records that they have, it's
All right, you know what? Change the records. What was it, 1 point?
Okay. Okay, let's do that then, right?
Yeah, that's-
But we
And
had,
that's-
at one point, we had added the property behind us.
Right, I'm only looking at that specific.
If
pro- you
that's
might
still
have
a
s-
separate parcel.
You might have a separate parcel, but that
Well,
address is one of
it was joined. It was joined at the time.
If
we
it's
did it.
joined, then you're, yeah.
It's not showing as joined on the tax records.
Okay. I won't say a word. Thank
We'll get you on the other parcel though, don't worry.
William Bardell, 20-year resident, 37865 Point Rosa. I'm not in this district, and I ask all the residents here to stick around because these guys are going to spend more money after this hearing. I like Harrison Township, but I also like people. And this doesn't concern me, but it concerns people in our township. And I want to know why on God's green earth, and do me a favor, Mr. Axtell, either that or I have to close my eyes. When you show these pictures of pumps and pipes, I tell you what, in my organization, you'd be on a 6-week vacation to the fab shop. That's all I'm going to say, or I'm going to have to close my eyes when I see these pumps and these pipes. You're getting engineering wages. Why can't you run a power line to put a real pump in there instead of fueling up pumps? Number one. You're getting engineering wages. You can't figure that out. Why are we draining into the Sunnybrook canals? Did we pay part of their dredging? You know, with water comes sediment. This is not rocket science. So did we supplement Sunnybrook for their canal when they got dredged? I don't think so. It's a public works project. Keyword, public works. We talked about these drains 3 years ago. Nothing happened because there was an election coming up. Now we got an election, was over with, so now we're sticking it to you. It's not a lot of money. It's the precedent of the idea. It's a public works project. Please do not show me any more of these pumps and those pipes like that, or I'll have to just close my eyes. Please. You're supposed to be professionals here. You can't run a power line to put a real pump in, and you're supposed to maintain pumps. Maintain means maintain the pumps. It's ridiculous. You're supposed to be Republicans. You're going to have to get some Democrats in here or something. This don't make sense. So go ahead and spin it. What do you got?
I apologize.
Well, you answer everyone else's question, so.
I guess I didn't.
So
catch your
go
question,
ahead.
Sir. What's your
You didn't
question?
answer the question? Why are we fueling up pumps? And we got a guy who's making engineering pay that can't run a line or a 220 line or know how many foot in the ground and have an insulated line and a circuit breaker in a substation. I don't get it. Run a foundation. Put some R22 down. I mean, what's up with that?
So the answer to
In my trade, you'd go to the fab shop for 6 weeks, or you'd get a clean layoff. I'm just saying. I got to close my eyes. I can't look at it. I don't know. What are we paying for? It's the point is, these people, it's not a lot of money, but it's the precedent. It's not a lot of money.
I think it is.
It's a whole precedent of the thing. You did it after the election. Why didn't you do it 3-4 years ago when we were talking about it? Establish what the elevation is. Establish this stuff. We talked about it. So I'm going to go sit down, so go ahead and spin it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's It certainly has been discussed for several years, and the direction from this board has been to work toward rebuilding the pump station. And the direction to our Public Works Director has been, keep it running until we rebuild it. We've talked about it. I've been supervisor since 2011. We've been talking about it that long. It's not an easy thing. It's not real popular. We've looked at all kinds of different sources of funding, and in the end, we have found only funding to help with the engineering.
Everybody ready?
Sir?
Yeah, I actually would like to comment. For one, I am not an engineer, and I don't feel I get engineer wages. I am public services director. I oversee water and sewer in the building department, some of the fleet maintenance, things of that nature. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. I was one of the guys out there before those pumps were put there, and watched it flood numerous times. I was thankful that I had those pumps to put out there so the residents didn't flood. If they weren't there, that's exactly what would happen. Am I proud of those 1968 pumps that we had with 300 6-cylinder Ford engines in them? That we have to go out and fuel up all the time? No, not really. But you know what? I keep the water out of people's yards and out of their basements. That's my job. So I will continue to do my job as I'm supposed to do my job. And I will continue to report to my supervisor as I'm supposed to. If it were as simple as running an electric line, which I've already burned up 3 or 4 electric pumps, I would do that. So I would gladly explain any of this at any time.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir?
Okay. My name is Ronald Springer. I live at 38226 Hammond. I've been a resident for 40 years. For my yard, this has been an ongoing problem with water the entire time. In the springtime, I have a duck pond, and I have ducks that show up every year. I agree that something needs to be done, but I am against the cost factor of it, and I know you don't have as much control over the cost as you might like to. I believe Adam made a statement that there was a 45-day period of time in which to pay this once the bills come out. Do we have any idea when these assessments would actually be levied, and when would it be the start and the stop time, the window in which we would have opportunity to pay this?
Yeah, so we try and give you that 45-day window, so we have to have it done, we have to have the project completely finished in advance of being able to do that. So assuming the project moves swiftly and we're done by midsummer, we'll have final billing by then. We should be able to get something to the treasurer's office to go out in October, which would give ample time prior to that December 1st date when the tax bills go out, when that would then roll over.
Okay, so
Sometime in October would probably be, that'd be the target goal.
Obviously, things could change. There could be.
We've had some assessments where we couldn't get that final number because we were haggling with one of the contractors over some cost item. So the township holds the special assessment for another year to make sure you get that opportunity to, pay that without interest. We don't want somebody to be penalized because we're not ready.
Okay. I'm getting older, I forgot the other question I was gonna ask. Am I right in assuming that for a special assessment to a property, that even if it ended up on your tax bill, that is not deductible from your income tax for improvements? Or
That'd be a question for a tax professional. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of deductibility, I don't know that I'd be in a position to say whether it's deductible or not. I'm
It's
not
not
sure.
a tax, it's a special
Technically, they're
assessment.
not deductible, but everybody throws them on there because they're an escrow and no one says a thing.
Well, I was just wondering, on the tax bill itself, is it going to be listed as, you have your various, for the school tax, for the police, fire, and so on?
It's itemized.
It will be itemized and listed as SAD for, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Blake Hurley. I reside at 38751 Reimold. The homeowner is Ryan Durant. I'm also here on behalf of my neighbor, 38777 Reimold. He couldn't be here due to personal injury. Thankfully, we have the exact same issues. we are reserving the right to protest. We do understand that this is definitely something that is needed, but we do have issues with some of the costs that are associated, do seem fairly high for many residents. We are both thankfully in a position where we can pay for this, but it does seem to be a lot of burden onto residents, especially those who might have larger lot sizes. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that, I haven't been a resident of Harrison Township for particularly long compared to many of these people, and it was actually very hard to find some of the information that I needed about this project. Throughout time, I was going through trying to find exactly what was being talked about in many of the documents provided, and it seems like there is a bit of a disconnect between what's going on in the project background and what's actually the services actually being rendered. And I think that's a lot of what a lot of people are here about is just they don't understand. It would be nice going forward if there's maybe some sort of better summaries of these things so people could be more informed with these kind of decisions. You have these meetings so people can make informed decisions and come to you, but when we're only here trying to clear up questions, it's very hard to relay what we actually feel. I know it's difficult for many people to vocalize exactly what they want out of this, and I think partially if we have some better information, we could tell you how we're feeling about something and our thoughts on it, rather than just trying to clear up the uncertainty that we might have. That's all. Thank you.
Sir, can you give me your last name again? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Hurley, Hurley.
Thank you.
I would also just like to say thank you very much to the clerk's office. They were very helpful when I was trying to find information, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jim Senstock, 31698 CN1. I'm not a member of this district, but I am a member of